Hey, my name is Tanner Ingledale. I'm 15, I go to Bryan High School. And I think the first time my faith was really challenged was when I was 9. I grew up in church, so I had no problem believing there was a God or He existed. So I went to church every Sunday, and I loved it. Until my father was diagnosed with esophageal cancer. And even then, I was very confident he's gonna be fine. I didn't worry nearly as much as I should have. But a few weeks passed and his condition got a lot worse. So bad that I couldn't even see him. I had to wait because he was in critical condition. And one day, the doctors told my family that he had 1 week to live. And everything was crushed. I didn't know what to think. And I remember praying that they would find something that they missed, or that God would just heal him himself and that it would be like a miracle. And the next day I was in the waiting room. I couldn't go see him, but I was in the waiting room and I'd heard everybody talk about being saved. So I went ahead and I accepted Jesus into my heart, thinking, maybe now, God will listen to me. Maybe He'll listen to my prayers now. But my dad didn't even last the whole week. He lasted 3 more days, and then he passed away. And the funeral was even worse. That was easily the worst day of my life. All these people telling me it was God's will, or He's with the angels, and I thought it was bull. And the funeral was huge. There was over 100 people there, and I was at the very front. And I looked around, and I saw people pointing at me because I knew they were talking about me, but no one could walk up and talk to me themselves. It made me feel even more depressed. And the preacher gave some 30-minute sermon about life. I didn't even pay attention, but I was just happy when it ended, and everybody was dismissed, and he had an open casket. Everyone walked past him, and it was finally my turn. I was almost last. I was next to last. I walked up to his body, I hugged him, and I remember walking away knowing that was the last time I'd ever see my dad. And I got in the car with my grandparents. I didn't ride with my mom, I rode with my grandparents, and I was just really confused. I didn't really get it. I didn't understand life or why God would do this to me, or really anything. I was almost helpless. And I started to fall into a really deep depression. I didn't even do anything with my life. I just would go home and I would sit on my bed. I got to a point where I didn't even know if God existed. I became something called an agnostic. I didn't know what that was, and I wasn't committed to it at the time. But that's what I was. And I would stay up at night. I wouldn't be able to sleep, and I would think about God and my life, and does it even matter? And it wasn't until the beginning of this year that I even got back into church in my youth group, Indian Springs, before that I was almost chronically depressed. I could have been diagnosed with depression. And I got back into church, and my faith slowly started to be restored. And I remember, as my faith got better, thinking if I was even saved, because I heard a lot of people talk about if they made a mistake when they were a kid or something. They thought they understood if they didn't. They got saved twice. Well, I was thinking, well, maybe I did that. And I remember one day I was going to the garage to get my basketball, and we have a radio in there. And it was playing like a testimony from some guy who, when he was 15, realized that he had messed up and he rededicated his life to Christ because of the death of his grandparents or something. And I listened to the entire testimony. It was a really good testimony. And I felt kind of sad because I knew it was probably relevant to my life. But I brushed it off. I went outside, played basketball for a couple hours. I went back inside and I listened to Pandora. And Pandora has those super annoying ads when you try to skip songs. And usually it's like Steve Landers or something no one cares about. But This time it was like a Christian ad. And I tried to back out of the station, go to a new one, but it accidentally leaked me to the website. And as soon as I got to the website, it pulled up like a podcast, and it was the exact same testimony I just heard like 2 hours ago. And then the next day on Caleb, somebody like called in and gave their testimony about when they were saved, and things like this started to happen like every day for a couple weeks. And it was really weird and extremely creepy. And I thought, well, I'm just gonna go talk to Mark. I showed up on Wednesday that day, or that night, and Mark wasn't even giving a sermon. Jared was preaching this day. And I didn't really care. I was just gonna talk to Mark. That was the only thing on my mind. And Jared started this series called So You Think You're a Christian, and hit every point that I had questioned about for those last couple weeks on being saved, on, well, everything. He even at one point said saying a prayer when you're a little kid doesn't count. Now I can remember being in that room in the hospital when I was 9. I had no idea what was going on, what was going to happen. That doesn't count. He hit everything. And in all honesty, it brought me to tears that God had to literally spell out, like, you're not saved. I'm calling you, come on. And I went and talked to Mark, and I told him I'm ready to dedicate my life to Christ. And he like bear hugged me, high-fived. As I look back at everything though, God was with me even when I blasphemed him in the hardest times. When my dad died, when I was an agnostic and I was depressed, that's when I thought about God the most. And that's something that I've always wondered was why. And it's because God is with you in your hardest times. It's not like he's here when everything's awesome. I mean, why was it that I only thought about God? Why was it I went home and I would just lay in my bed and do practically nothing but think about God and being saved and whether he exists? It's because God was right there with me. He was pressing my thoughts, trying to get me back, and he did. And I'm so thankful for that. In I think Revelations, it says that when you hear a knock, open the door. So when you're being called, you gotta do what you're being called to do. I was being called to be saved. It shouldn't have took those 2 weeks. It should have took that time in the garage and then the Pandora for me to know, but I was a little stubborn. But it shouldn't have took that long.